The day he came home jobless, fear entered our home, and I felt our world starting to crumble.
My name is Clara, and I am 29 years old. I have been married to my husband, Ethan, for 5 years, and although our life has never been full of luxury, comfort, or the kind of freedom that allows people to stop worrying about money, I always believed that as long as we stayed united and kept trying, we would somehow find a way to survive whatever life placed in front of us. Ethan is 35 years old, and together we have a little daughter named Lily, who is 5 years old and has the kind of innocent smile that can make even the heaviest day feel a little lighter. We live in a small rented apartment in an old building that has never been beautiful, but for a long time it still felt like a home filled with warmth, effort, and the quiet routines that make ordinary life meaningful. The walls are thin, the kitchen is tiny, and the bathroom door sticks every time the weather changes. But it is the place where our daughter learned to walk, where we shared late dinners after exhausting days, and where we built a life that may not have looked impressive from the outside, but felt honest and safe to us. My husband, Ethan, worked in a warehouse for a delivery company, and his job was the kind of work that leaves a man physically drained long before the day is over. He spent his hours lifting heavy boxes, organizing shipments, loading trucks, and moving constantly until his shoulders ached and his back stiffened from the pressure of doing hard labor every single day. He woke up before sunrise almost every morning, got dressed quietly in the dark so he would not wake Lily, drank his coffee too quickly, and left the apartment while I was still half asleep, always carrying the tired determination of someone who knew he had no choice but to keep going. The pay was never impressive, but it was steady, and sometimes steady is the only thing standing between a family and disaster. His salary paid our rent, our bills, our groceries, Lily's school supplies, and all the small but necessary things that keep a household running. We never had enough to feel comfortable, and there was never room for unnecessary spending, but there was enough to survive, and for a long time, survival felt like a kind of peace. We did not go on vacations. We did not buy expensive things. We rarely ate outside. We always told ourselves, maybe next month. And somehow, for a while, that was enough. Then one evening, Ethan came home with a face I will never forget, because before he even spoke, before he even sat down, I could already feel that something had happened that was going to change the rhythm of our entire life. He opened the door slowly, stepped inside without saying anything, and placed his keys on the table with the kind of silence that immediately made my heart tighten. Usually, no matter how tired he was, he still managed to smile at Lily, ask what I had cooked, or say something small to make the apartment feel alive again after a long day. But that evening, he looked like a man carrying something too heavy to speak about.
I looked at him and asked softly, "Ethan, what happened?" He sat down at the kitchen table and kept his eyes on the floor for a moment before finally saying, in a voice that sounded almost unfamiliar, "They made cuts at work today." At first, I did not fully understand what he meant, so I stared at him and asked, "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, rubbed his hands together, and then said the words that made my entire body go cold. "They let me go, Clara." For a moment, I honestly felt like I could not breathe. I looked at him, waiting for something else, waiting for him to say that it was temporary or that there had been some kind of misunderstanding, but instead he lowered his head and whispered, "I'm sorry." That word broke me more than I expected, because in that moment, I realized that he was not only scared about losing his job, he was already starting to feel ashamed, as if this had happened because he had somehow failed us. Before we continue the story, download the PDF in the description And stay till the end. You'll find useful vocabulary, examples, and a fun quiz. That night, after Lily had gone to sleep, we sat together at the kitchen table with a notebook and wrote down every expense we had. And for the first time in a very long time, I saw our life as something frighteningly fragile. We listed the rent, the electricity, the water bill, groceries, school costs, transportation, and every other small expense that normally blends into ordinary life until suddenly you no longer know how you are going to pay for any of it. We had a little savings, but not enough to make me feel safe. It was the kind of money people slowly build over years and lose in a matter of weeks when life decides to test them without warning. Ethan promised me that he would start looking for another job immediately, and to be fair to him, he did exactly that. Every morning, he woke up early as if he still had somewhere to be, sat at the old laptop, updated his CV, searched online, filled out applications, printed resumes, and went from one interview to another, carrying hope that became a little weaker each time he returned home empty-handed. At first, I admired his determination and told myself that this was just a temporary setback, something difficult but manageable, something we would one day look back on and say, "That was hard, but we survived." But the days kept passing. Then the days became weeks, and slowly the fear became real. I started noticing how quickly our savings were disappearing and how much emotional weight lives inside small financial decisions when a family is under pressure. Grocery shopping stopped being a routine errand and became a painful exercise in choosing what we could live without. I began buying cheaper food, comparing every price, putting things back on shelves, and pretending in front of Lily that everything was normal, even when I could feel anxiety sitting in my chest from morning until night. One afternoon, while I was baking simple pastries at home, my cousin Maya came over and casually suggested that I try selling homemade food online because, in her words, people pay good money for things that feel homemade and real. At first, I almost laughed because the idea felt too unrealistic for someone like me, but the truth was that we had reached a point where unrealistic ideas were starting to feel more useful than helpless waiting. So, the next day, I borrowed her phone, took photos of my pastries, cakes, and small homemade dishes, and posted them online in a few local groups. At first, I received only 1 or 2 small orders, and the money was not enough to change our situation in any dramatic way, but it was still something, and when life becomes unstable, even something small can feel like a rope keeping you from sinking completely. Little by little, I began taking more orders, and before I fully realized it, my days had become completely full. I was waking up early to make breakfast, get Lily ready for school, clean the apartment, answer customer messages, buy ingredients, bake, cook, decorate cakes, wash dishes, organize deliveries, and still somehow try to stay emotionally available for my daughter and my husband at the same time. Some days, I felt proud that I was helping keep us afloat. Other days, I felt so exhausted that even standing in the kitchen felt unbearable. Meanwhile, Ethan was still trying, but I could see that every rejection was taking something out of him that no one else could see. At first, he came home frustrated but still hopeful. Then he became quieter, then slower. Then one day, I realized that what I was watching was not laziness or weakness, but a man slowly losing confidence in himself after hearing no too many times. One evening, after a long day of baking, cleaning, and trying to stretch one order into enough money to cover groceries for the next 2 days, I walked into the living room and found him sitting in silence while the television played in front of him, even though it was obvious he wasn't really watching it. I stood there for a second and asked, "Did you send the applications you said you would send today?" He looked up and said quietly, "Not yet." That answer should not have broken me the way it did, but by then I was running on stress, fear, and exhaustion, and sometimes those things come out sounding harsher than the pain behind them. I looked at him and said, Ethan, I have been working all day. I am baking, cleaning, taking care of Lily, answering customers, and trying to keep this house together while everything feels like it's falling apart. I can't carry all of this by myself. The moment I said it, I saw the hurt on his face. He stood up slowly and looked at me with the kind of silence that hurts more than shouting. "You think I don't know that?" he asked quietly. And suddenly, all my anger collapsed into guilt. The next morning, we apologized to each other, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan admitted that after so many rejections, he had started feeling ashamed, useless, and afraid of failing again before he even walked into an interview. Hearing him say those words out loud changed something in me, because I realized that while I had been carrying the fear of survival, he had been carrying the pain of feeling like he was no longer enough for the people he loved most. After that conversation, he stopped waiting only for the right job and started applying absolutely everywhere. He applied to grocery stores, hardware shops, maintenance jobs, cleaning companies, factories, and furniture workshops, anywhere that needed honest hands and someone willing to work. A few days later, he got called for an interview at a small furniture workshop that needed someone for physical labor and basic assembly work. When he got the call, he looked nervous rather than excited, almost as if hope itself had become something too risky to trust. He told me, "They'll probably reject me too." But by then, I had learned that when life is falling apart, you do not wait for confidence to appear before moving forward. So I handed him his jacket and simply said, "Go anyway." He left, and for the next few hours, I moved around the apartment with my heart beating too fast, trying to distract myself while imagining every possible outcome. When he finally came back later that afternoon, I looked at his face and prepared myself for disappointment. But instead, he smiled. And then he said the words I had been desperate to hear for weeks. "They hired me." I burst into tears immediately. The job did not pay as much as his old one, and it was not the future we had once imagined for ourselves, but it was steady, honest work, and in that moment, it felt like the beginning of our life returning to us piece by piece. Life did not suddenly become easy after that. We still had bills, we still had worries, we still had to count every dirham and think carefully before spending money. But the difference was that the pressure was no longer crushing only one of us, while the other slowly disappeared under shame. I kept my small food business, Ethan worked hard at his new job, and together we slowly began rebuilding not only our finances, but also the partnership that stress had almost taken away from us. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Ethan quietly admitted that there had been days when he stayed outside after interviews because he was too ashamed to come home and tell me he had failed again. Hearing that broke something open inside me because it made me understand how much silent pain he had been carrying behind the simple words, "I'm trying." And that was when I truly understood something I will never forget. Hard times do not only test your bank account. They test your marriage, your patience, your pride, your honesty, and your ability to keep loving each other when life becomes heavier than either of you expected. Today, our life is still simple, and we still work hard for everything we have, but our home feels stronger now because it has survived a season that almost broke us. And if there is one thing I learned through all of it, it is that a family does not stay strong because life is easy, but because even when fear enters the house and sits quietly at the table with you, love keeps choosing not to. In this section, I'll show you some important words from the story, their meanings, and a simple example to help you understand and use them. Uncertainty. The word uncertainty means not knowing what will happen or what the future will be like. For example, after he lost his job, the family lived with a lot of uncertainty. Confidence. The word confidence means believing in yourself and your abilities. For example, Maria spoke with confidence during her school presentation. Support. The word support means helping someone or staying by their side. For example, my parents always support me when I have a problem. Exhausted. The word exhausted means very tired after doing something difficult. For example, after cleaning the whole house, Sarah felt exhausted. Hope. The word hope means believing that something good can happen. For example, even during hard times, he never lost hope. Failure. The word failure means not succeeding in something. For example, Tom saw his first failure as a lesson, not the end. Responsibility. The word responsibility means something important that you must do or take care of. For example, taking care of a pet is a big responsibility. Survive. The word survive means to continue living or keep going during difficult times. For example, they worked hard to survive after losing their jobs. Pressure. The word pressure means a strong feeling of stress or worry. For example, she felt a lot of pressure before the exam. Peaceful. The word peaceful means calm, quiet, and free from stress or problems. For example, after moving to her new apartment, Elena finally felt peaceful. What does uncertainty mean? A. Being sure about everything. B. Not knowing what will happen. C. Feeling happy. D. Having no problems. The answer is B. Not knowing what will happen. What does confidence mean? A. Being afraid. B. Feeling tired. C. Believing in yourself. Or D. Asking for help. The answer, C. Believing in yourself. What does survive mean? A. To stop trying. B. To stay alive or continue. C. To forget everything. D. To lose hope. Challenge yourself. Write your answer in the comments. Thank you for watching. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any new content.